Alright, Muncies, if you didn't know, it's the end of an era. The Neca Godzilla line is coming to an end. So I thought what we would do here is go over a review of all the baseline Godzilla figures. Now, if you don't know what the baseline means, it means it's just the basic figures. It's not the alternative paint variants. But we're going to just go through here, look at all the highlights and all the flaws of the Neca, and have a little discussion and a look back together. So, first up, the Neca series started in 2014 with the Americanized new adaptation of Godzilla, the current ongoing Legendary series. This was a good starting point for Neca. One, because they started off with a CGI model for the sculpting, so there was no problems with that. It pretty much represented Godzilla in full detail pretty much for a reasonable price point. I think it was only $20 when this line started, as opposed to the other options of SH Monster Arts or something even more expensive like X Plus. This was a great starting point for collectors here. As I said, this was based off the CGI model scan, and so there's really nothing to complain about when it comes to this figure here. All he really had to do was work on the paint, and the paint delivers. It's not the best, but it's definitely far from the worst, as you'll see in upcoming figures here. Yeah, so pretty much every Godzilla figure has articulation in the jaw, the head, the neck, the shoulders, the elbows, the wrists, the waistline, the hips, the knees, the ankles, and then various points along the tail here. Now, when the series first started out, it started out with the last segment of the tail being, for actually a number of figures, being a bendy wire instead of articulation. But yeah, this was an overall really good starting point here. Like I said, not much paint, but where there is paint, it's a little sloppy. If you can see the little bit of gums bleeding and stuff, but it's nothing too bad. The eye came out clear, and nice shading overall. Moving on to the next figure here, we have the 1994. This is the second figure released. As you can see, they actually went for a overall greenish tint to Godzilla here. It's a little bit of an artistic expression, but it's not bad. However, this was never one of my favorite Godzilla figures. From the moment I first got this, the major problem I had with this figure was the tail. If you look at the tail, it's so thin looking compared to the rest of the figure. Proportion wise, it's just off completely. But like I said, the sculpt overall isn't that bad. They did a little bit of a funky job with the paint here. Like I said, the green doesn't come out quite well enough. It looks like he's bathed in algae or something. For some reason, they chose to give his nails a bluish paint color. I have no idea why they did that. It looks almost like that blue dye that they put in miniature golf courses at the water. Another thing with flaw with the paint is definitely the teeth. Look at how sloppily those gums are done here. They're just like almost bleeding right onto the teeth here. The eyes came out clear. As for articulation, it's still the same. Now, some of the articulation varies and stuff between figures depending on how bulky the figures were. Certain joints won't bend as well as the other. But the dorsal plates themselves, they came out really clean and clear. If you want to nitpick, you can maybe say that the bottom jaw here is just way too long. It kind of, he almost, when you close it up, he almost has like an underbite to him. Let's see here. Yeah, it's a little bit funky, but that's just me nitpicking. But moving on here. This is where Neca first dropped the ball, the 1984 Godzilla figure. Oh man, to be honest, the fan base really never recovered from this one here with this. A lot of fandoms have a disgruntled fan base, but maybe Neca is the most infamous when it comes to toy lines and stuff, for Godzilla at least. I'll leave it to you in the comment section. Is there a toy line for Godzilla that you know has a more disgruntled fan base than with Neca? Even when they did good, there was usually something that they dropped the ball about. Maybe they had a good sculpt on something, but then they dropped the ball on the paint, or they get the paint right and they drop the ball on the sculpting. Here with the 1984 figure, right off the bat, as soon as they did the proof of concept, it was wrong. The head was just shrunken so small, it made the neck look like it was giant. And they did an overhaul to completely re-sculpt the face at the last minute, but it really couldn't save this figure. Look how tiny the dorsal plates are on the back here. Once again, he's suffering from this super skinny tail where it looks like he's He's not eating well, he's starving. Get him some food. The paint's not too bad. It's a little bit splotched up around the teeth. They decided for the claws to ditch that blue shading that they went with the 1994 figure and go with something that's almost skin tone. But once again, look at the sculpt. Look how massive this toenail is here compared to the other ones. I don't know what they were thinking. Why they couldn't have fixed that overall. But if I have to say something good about this, I do like the face overall compared to what it could have turned out to be. But trust me, this isn't the last time we'll talk about this one here. Moving along here. This is sort of like the very first variant slash repaint, the 1995 figure. But I included it in here because he's supposed to be his own character, his own design. They kind of redid the torso of the body to add this translucent effect. Let me see if I can get him up in the light one last time. There you go. Yep. With that being said, though, oh man, I don't know if you can pick this up on camera here, but there's like a little bit of green in the translucence here for some reason. Like I said, this sculpt already wasn't one of my favorite, but for some reason, adding the translucent effect, translucency in itself is okay, but the pattern of it looks strange. Like, look at the way the flames are designed in. They're more like flames. They look like kind of like wings. It actually looks like he has full-blown body art tattooed all over him and stuff, rather than being a meltdown or a burning Godzilla pose. And furthermore, they kept the blue nails, which completely contrasts the orange color and everything here. It just does not work well. And so I feel like it's still not quite as bad as the 1984, but it was a second strikeout, in my opinion, from Neca. They really needed to hit one out of the park to get fans back on board, and boy, I think the next figure did it. Once again, here we have the 1954 Godzilla. Look at him. He's supposed to be all black and white, and maybe that's what it looks like here on the camera, but actually they splashed some blue all over him, and it looks so right. Now, I can complain here once again that the tail was a little bit too skimpy or skinny, but overall the sculpt is great. This is one of the few Neca figures where no matter what angle you look at the face, Godzilla looks like Godzilla and not something derpy. They really hit it out of the park and gained my trust with them here on this figure. Now, they did go a little bit easy on the paint, though, even though they chose the blue and stuff for that overall coating. But they went very simple with this, like, cement gray, no shading or anything. And they really could have done something better to add some detail onto the nails, but I'd rather have them do almost no detail with the painting rather than do painting and mess everything up. But boy, was this a win in my book. Next up, the 2001 Godzilla. As you can see right off the bat, he's got this greenish paint splashed over him. I'm not exactly sure why. He should be completely gray, if anything else, if nothing else. But I'm okay with the green. I grew up with many different comic and cartoon expressions of Godzilla having a green coat to him, coat of paint to him, and so I'm okay with that. The sculpting overall is pretty good. You can nitpick and say maybe the nostrils flare out a little bit too much, or maybe his jaw curls down a little bit too much. But overall, like I said, the sculpt is on point. But yeah, they really messed up with the paint again on this figure here. For some reason, they added pink to him pretty much everywhere. Like, they added it in his claws here to give it, maybe it's supposed to be like a dirty earth appearance to him. I'm not quite sure. Maybe like there's dirt in the claws or what. But the biggest problem is the bottom jaw. It's got this pink coat that just splashes down over. It looks like he was drinking strawberry milk and just spilled it all over him. I can't figure out what the problem is and why they even approved that in the first place, but once again, you can still say that the tail's a little bit skimpy. They did thicken it up on the base here. Come on, focus. They did thicken them up a little bit here on the base, but it still thins out so quickly to become the short, stubby tail. But moving along, Shin Godzilla was up next. Now, I was super excited to get this figure, but look at the paint mess here. I mean, there was like a year-long delay on this figure here. It was supposed to come out in 2016, but then it was pushed back to 2017 for some reason, I guess because of merchandising rights or whatever. But look at everything about the paint here is pretty much wrong. They decided to add what looks like almost melted Velveeta cheese over here, just chunks of it here to give like a glowing effect, I guess. And now I understand Shin Godzilla's design here. I think this might be a CGI model also that they used for this figure, and so the sculpt looks pretty great. But because it's full of so many creases and wrinkles and the texture of his skin and everything, is for a, I think at this point, $23, $24 price range, it would have been darn near impossible for him to actually get in there and do a fantastic paint job with that. So I understand, to keep the price value down, they kind of just had to splotch it on in some places. But nonetheless, though, it does hurt the overall appearance of this figure, though. And you can actually see the difference, though. You see like the darkness in the neck and the gloss of the paint. But then up here on the head, it's like completely dry and gray looking. There's really a variation there. But overall, yeah, his appearance isn't that bad. Alright, but Neca really, around this time, the fan base was already really distrusting Neca with the paint jobs here. We're getting tons of paint variants and stuff of different versions of some of these previously released figures. But Neca really needed a winner, and in my opinion, they delivered with the next one. The 1963 King Kong vs. Godzilla. This is quite possibly peak Neca, in my opinion. Once again, the sculpt for the face, for being an original sculpt, is spot on. No matter what angle you look at this figure, you look at that face and you know that's Godzilla, and it's a full representation. This, for not really increasing the price value, and then somehow the price point, and then somehow also including this accessory here for the first time in the Neca series, having an atomic breath effect piece, was done very well. And this is something Neca should really be proud of, that they could actually pull this off. I don't care what franchise it is, whether it's Ninja Turtles or Freddy Krueger or what, Aliens or Predator, whatever franchise they have, this particular Godzilla figure, in my opinion, should be on their top shelves of one of their best products ever released. There is no flaws, at least on mine, in the paint everywhere. Look how clean those teeth are. Everything about this came out right. The tail is nice and thick. Maybe once again you can argue it's a little bit on the stubby side, but it's not really that bad at all. I mean, this is what every figure up until this point should have looked like. At least the ones that weren't using CGI models. Something this quality standards. And not only did they get the detail right, but they really got the effect of the bulky tokusatsu suit, that sagging costume that the actors would just use. They really had that with all the wrinkles and folds in the thighs and different parts of the body and stuff. This came out perfect. Unfortunately, then we moved on to the 2019 Godzilla here. And once again, this is a CGI model figure here. So it should be perfect. And they tried to simplify it so much just to make it an easy win. And yet they still dropped the ball. Where did they drop the ball? With the paint. Oh my goodness, look at those lips. It looks like he smeared lipstick all over himself. Look at that eye. That's laughable. That's bootleg quality. Why would they ever allow that? And for most of the figure, they kind of just went easily with a dusty paint coating look to them and stuff, so they didn't want to go anything too elaborate because they might mess it up. And sure enough, they did. Look at that face. But I have to give props to those nails, though. Man, look, this might be some of the best work Neca has ever done on a Godzilla figure when it comes to claws. I mean, just look at the shading and stuff of how it's got this like aging, yellowing toenail look to them. Beautifully done. However, Neca quickly recovered with their 1964 Mothra vs. Godzilla figure here. Look at this. Once again, they opted to choose to include another original atomic breath accessory here. Yeah, I can't get over how clean those teeth are and how well they're sculpted too. They really reflect that deformed looking mouth that Godzilla had. The proportions, once again, are on point with this figure here. They do pretty well with the tail. You can maybe say it's supposed to be a little bit longer, but it's not that bad. The only real downside I have to this figure here is, this is just my opinion, but the ring around his eye, that drives me insane. Why did they do that? I mean, I guess maybe in the brightness it looks okay like this. It kind of looks like he has makeup around the eye, or maybe like he hasn't slept in a while. It kind of throws me off in a little bit in my opinion. But overall, this is also an almost perfect figure here. Very impressive and well done. And now, coming up to the newer figures here, like I said, Neca is losing the license to Godzilla, and so this is one of the last figures you'll ever have the chance to buy from Neca. One of the last. There's a couple of variants coming out, and there's still one more after this here. But this is the 1989, just released from July 2020 here. Once again, they threw in an atomic effect here, accessory. I can't quite figure out why they choose to give some of these figures atomic breaths, and then why sometimes they just hold them off and say, no, we're going to wait till a paint version comes out to include that. Maybe they knew that they were losing the license, and so they figured, hey, we're not going to have time to do an atomic breath version of this, and we already had this made, so let's just throw it in there with that to bundle it up to get a few extra cells in there. The paint is pretty good. When you look at this, they went really basic on the paint here to avoid any flaws. Looks like they started to add a slight layer of green if you look in some of that chest area there. But the face, I know a lot of people talk on the internet about the face looking a little bit derpy. It really is, depending on what angle. So this could have been a almost perfect figure if it didn't have these slight flaws to them. Otherwise, the sculpt is pretty nice. The proportion's great. Look at that tail. The longest tail yet. That is amazing. Oh, man. You would think I have something for tails, but no. I feel like Godzilla needs to have a mighty long tail and stuff to go with the rest of his body. And they really delivered here. The sculpt and articulation is pretty much up to point with this one here. And then finally, released at the same time as that figure, we have the 2003 Godzilla Tokyo SOS figure. I was a little disappointed when they first announced this figure because they were including the scarred version. I thought they maybe would save this for the alternate variant version. But I tell you what, I know the sunlight's making the scarred tissue look really pronounced here, but it's not that bad. You can usually overlook that if you didn't even want to look at that. And I know a lot of people are excited to own this one here, mainly because we'll never get a Godzilla 2000, a Godzilla Millennium from Neca. And the design's fairly similar compared to other ones, so this is the closest we'll get. Once again, a beautiful tail. The sculpt is done really well. I've seen some people complain about the way the face looks, but I think overall it turned out really beautiful. It's not the biggest highlight in the Neca series, but it was a good note to go out on. Alright, Muncies, let me step away here and get these figures realigned, and I'll do a top 5 best of the Neca base figures, and maybe at worst, so I'll be right back. Alright, Muncies, let's run through a quick couple rules here before we can determine what the top 5, in my opinion, are for the Neca Godzilla figures. Okay, number 1, I'm not going by any of the figures based on the CGI models, so you will not see the 2014 Godzilla on this list, but if he was, he'd probably be number 5, honestly. So I'm trying to go basically here between original sculpt versus paint application. Not so much the articulation, although some articulation really does vary between the figures. But with that being said, here is number 5, 2001. Yeah, there are some flaws with this figure. So there was a few contenders here for number 5, but overall, I feel like this is like the closest thing you can have to being a top 5 without it being quite perfect. Okay, number 4, believe it or not, maybe it's because this is new, but the 2003 Godzilla here. I know maybe the hype surrounding it is still getting to me, but overall, I feel like this is really decent. Sure, once again, it's not perfect. There's little flaws and little design choices that maybe you might not like about it. Maybe you don't like the way he looks from a certain angle and stuff. But overall, like I said, this was a really good note for Godzilla to go out on here. And also, I forgot to mention before, it was an odd choice that they decided NECA for the 1989 and the 2003 figures to go back to the bendy wire tail portion here. Strange choice. Alright, number 3 is where it gets really good, in my opinion. The 1954 Godzilla. Sure, like I said, it's supposed to be black and white, but they added that bluish tint to it and everything. But man, like I said, no matter how you look at his face, this looks like Godzilla as supposed to be interpreted as. Matter of fact, I was actually wanting to put him higher on the list. The only reason I didn't put him higher on the list is because, one, you could still argue that maybe the tail was a little bit too skinny, just a little bit. But compared to the next two figures, it just misses out, because the next two are the 1964 Godzilla. This one is a little bit bulkier in the toy, and it makes it feel like there's more to it. There's more quality and everything. And for some reason, this comes out right. Sure, I nitpicked about the eye, but this is as close to perfect as you can get without it actually being perfect. With that being said, what is the number 1 figure I choose? Well, if you didn't guess, it's the 1963 Godzilla. This really is the perfect Godzilla toy from NECA. It really represents the incarnation of Godzilla that is striving to represent in every way possible. Yeah, I really don't know what else I can say about this that I haven't already said. Everything down to the special effect piece that I didn't include for this part of the review, but everything just really pops with this figure. It's not too glossy. The shading, the color schemes all complement each other. This is one that you could argue, if you were looking at the articulation range here, that maybe this one would lose some points, because I don't feel like the legs turn quite as well on this figure. But man, this is what I wanted. There was real competition between SH Monster Arts and NECA for when this figure was coming out, because they were both announcing that this figure would be released in their own versions. And you know what? NECA really gave SH Monster Arts a run for their monsters, for their money, pardon me. Yeah, so what do you think about this order here? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Like I said, if I was going to pick a CGI modeled character, I'd put the 2014 in fifth place. Okay, Muncies, it's time to talk about the worst of the worst. Now, once again, say it with me. This is just Giant Muncie's opinion here. But here we go. Here's my top worst NECA figures here. 2019 figure. Face is messed up, and that is pretty much the main reason. But the thing is this was a CGI model. All they had to worry about was the paint. For as beautiful as 99% of the body is, the face has to be a selling point. And there's just something about when you see this in person, it looks even worse. It is laughable. That's really what it is. The face takes all the seriousness. It takes the God out of Godzilla. That's what it does. It sounds like I'm nitpicking, but it's where the bug becomes the feature of this. It stands out so much. Second worst NECA figure, in my opinion, is the 1995 figure. Like I said, I already wasn't a fan of the 1994 figure, but the color changes between, even though it's so great to have something unique like a translucent figure here in the NECA line, which I give NECA lots of respect for that. It is unique. It just does not look appealing overall compared to the other figures. If NECA ever gets the merchandise line back, they need to not reissue these figures, but do a complete overhaul, a complete remold, a redesign of some of these early figures to keep up with the newer ones. Because the quality, believe it or not, did change greatly. They became thicker and bulkier. And the color just contrast here is just completely off. I don't know. It just doesn't work for me. And you can probably guess what the number 1 worst NECA figure is, believe it or not, the 1984 figure. Oh man, there was not many 1984 figures on the market of Godzilla, and a lot of fans were really anticipating this figure here, and when it came out, it just came out wrong in every way. It's a failed attempt to represent it. I like it just because there's so few 1984 Godzilla figures out there, but man, I mean, just look how tiny, there's that massive claw there, but look how tiny the feet look compared to the rest of the figure. The ankles are so skinny looking. It looks like he would collapse under his own weight. It's something else, alright. Credit to Neca for trying to save this at the last second, but they should have just scrapped the whole body type and started all over with this. But even with that being said, I still really like these figures here because it is Godzilla, and even with them being misformed, minus the sloppy paint job, but even with them being disproportionate to how they should look, I love it because it gives it like a variation and it makes them unique in their own way. You know, it's almost like looking at a different Godzilla that we've never seen. But come on, those spines are so small. But with that being said, Neca, thank you for all your work, and I really do appreciate the run that you guys put through with this, and I hope that one day you guys can carry on this again. I hope you guys learn from your mistakes and learn from the successes too. So, until next time, thank you, Munsties.